Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Helen Rice. I'm the Chief Executive of Advising Communities. I'm hoping some of you have heard of us. We are presently offering advice and support to all the different parent carer networks and contact generally. And we are really excited to be able to start doing a series of webinars. Some of you might have tuned in to Stephanie and Kobe, who gave a webinar on GDPR. That's been a lot of fun for all of us, including us here running a legal charity, as I'm sure you're aware. So often we are parallel working, so we're also making the changes for our own organisation, whilst you guys I know are doing very similar things. So today's webinar, you'll see we have a presentation, but obviously I'm here and I will be taking questions via emails too. So just so you know a little bit about the webinar in case you've not used it before. If there's a technical hitch, please do bear with us. Those of you joining by PC, laptop, tablet or smartphone should now be able to see this introductory slide. I'm hoping you can. For times and questions, as there are so many attendees, it's not practical for verbal questions to be taken. Therefore, you will all remain muted throughout. If at any point you have questions, please use the question icon on the GoToWebinar toolbar on your screen. There's a question mark if you look. This will allow you to type your question into the text box and submit this to the webinar administrator. I will select as many relevant questions as time will allow. So if similar questions are received, I will try and condense these where possible. So just to tell you a little bit about myself. So as I said, I'm Helen Rice, I'm the Chief Executive, and you won't normally get me on webinars, but today is just your lucky day. Basically, I have spent my life advising charities since my career started, where I worked at the Charity Commission. So today I'm doing this because the people that work for us were originally trained by me, which is quite a frightening proposition for the world. However, we are trained by charity lawyers at the Charity Commission, and we have very in-depth training around the history of charity and the legal structures of charity. I also construct and write governing documents. So as well as being in the registration department, where I used to register charities for a living, I then was promoted and ran the advice service. And at the time that I was at the Charity Commission, it was a much bigger advice service than you get now. There was a lot more support that was offered and not just regulatory issues covered. And then since then, I've worked at both the Directory of Social Change as a Director of Learning and at Community Matters, where I was Director of Development. And I've been advising small and medium-sized charities nearly all my career until I took this job 10 years ago. And even now, we're back doing this again, which is really exciting for us. So we're using the legal understanding of our solicitors, as well as the practical knowledge of running an advice service and organisation to help organisations in the community do things as well as they can. So in terms of understanding legal structures in the voluntary and community sectors, we'll get started. So the agenda today, we're going to start with talking about the common types of legal structures that register as charities, obviously with a focus on the charitable incorporated organisation, as it's so topical at the moment, and we're seeing quite a few of those applications go through. We're going to talk a bit about charity trusteeship, what it means to be a charity trustee in the UK, the social enterprise and community interest company model, the different registrars and eligibility criteria, the advantages and disadvantages of the different models, in particular looking at registered charity status and community interest companies. And I will, if things come up next to me and it's relevant, I'll take questions as I go to try and keep it interesting for you, or I will save them up for the end and we'll see how we go. So what does it take to become a registered charity, and what is the basic eligibility criteria? The number of charities registered in England and Wales fluctuates. There are times when I've known it hit around 196,000 charities in the UK, and presently it's more like 170,000. The charities in England and Wales are covered by the Charity Commission, and they cover a very diverse sector, ranging from the largest in terms of income, which is the Arts Council for England, which has a whopping 400 million a year, to the smaller charities, which tend to be grassroots, community and voluntary groups, which include community buildings, village halls, local networks, children's centres, and often they are smaller than £5,000 a year, but still charitable in nature. The notion of what was charity was first introduced by Elizabeth I back in 1601, and it has evolved and changed ever since through various acts of parliament and regulations. So what does it take to be a charity nowadays? Firstly, your activities and your aims have to fall under one of the 13 heads of charity to set out under charity law, and you will see from the next slides the range of things that this does cover. Now, when I started the Charity Commission, which sadly for me, being that I'm getting a little bit old these days, is about 20 years ago, we still had 4 heads of charity, which we were largely taught about, which was at the time the prevention and relief of poverty, sickness and distress, the advancement of education, the advancement of religion, and anything else that was of benefit to the community. Now, through various acts of parliament and changes, we now have moved to a 13 heads of charity. So these are all the different areas which you can register a charity under. And for some charities, they may cover more than one. So, for example, an advice charity like us would have the relief of poverty. We'd also often have the advancement of education. We will often have a community head as well about the work we do in the community. So you can choose various heads of charity for your objects. So also the advancement of religion. Charity in England started from the church. So we still have huge amounts of very historic charities which are often now, pretty old and doing some very strange things. But that's the wonder of the history of charity. The advancement of health or the saving of lives is obviously charitable. The advancement of citizenship or community development, which is now a succinctly separate head of charity. The advancement of the arts, culture, heritage or science. The advancement of amateur sport. The advancement of human rights. The advancement of environmental protection or improvement. The relief of those in need by reason of youth, age, ill health, disability, financial hardship, etc. The advancement of animal welfare. The promotion of the efficiency of the armed forces of the Crown, or of the efficiency of the police, fire and rescue service, or ambulance services. A mop-up purpose, any purposes not above but recognised as charitable, which we all like to pop in the end of many an object because it allows us to have an openness to be able to take on new activities. Charity Commission doesn't always like that head put in, but if you can prove that you're doing quite wide-ranging work in the community and you want to catch all, it's a good one to use. Okay, so the basic eligibility criteria to register as a charity. First of all, it's all about your aims and activities. So what are you set up to do? What activities are you practically doing on a day-to-day level? Not the things you think you might do, the things you are actually doing. Doesn't mean you can't be prepared for the future, but you need to be able to prove when you try and register a charity that you are actually doing these activities or have planned to do so in the future. You must have a governing document in place that sets out your aims, objectives, how your charity is going to be managed, and administrative provisions. You must be able to satisfy the public benefit test. Now, this is absolutely critical. It's not enough that you are able to show that you fit under the heads of charity. It also must be for public benefit. Minimum, we would suggest there's 3 people to act as charity trustees. And income has to exceed £5,000 per annum to register, unless you're registering a CIO. You might have seen lots of things in the press about the situation with public benefit. Should private schools be charitable is a debate that's been rumbling on for many years. But everyone has to satisfy that they do enough public benefit to warrant the status of being a charity. So the common types of legal structures that register as a charity: unincorporated associations, trusts, charitable companies, and of course the CIO model, which is a charitable incorporated organisation. So unincorporated associations it's mostly adopted by small voluntary groups who do not occupy premises or employ staff. The turnover is usually below £20,000 per annum, but we do see them used by bigger organisations too. This type of structure is an open membership structure with a constitution where a committee is usually appointed at an AGM by a larger membership. So it's important to remember that a constitution is your governing document or your governing instrument. So depending on what way you want to go with your organisation for the future, it's important to get really good advice at the beginning. We see huge amounts of organisations that get set up and have to change their structure very quickly after being set up because they got the wrong thing in place. So I would really advise that you get really good advice up front. The trust structure, which you'll see there, the charitable trust, is usually governed by a declaration of trust or a trust deed instrument. And it's a capital sum or property or land that's held on trust. I registered once a charitable boat, which, for example, that in itself allowed it to be a charitable trust. And the boat was there to give children with disabilities access to opportunities to learn and to be educated on the water and to have day trips and to improve the quality of their life. So that got registered as a charity. But charitable trusts are often things like village halls, pieces of land, etc. And mostly they were things that were wealthy locals would have sort of given to the community as a gift, often back in the 19th century. Charitable trusts are used in modern day format, but a lot of them are very historic in their nature. And then there is a charitable company, which registers both with the Companies House and the Charity Commission, 2 regulators, 2 registrars, and EU company law. 2 sets of accounts and 2 annual returns to be submitted also on an accruals accounting basis to Companies House and the Charity Commission. This type of structure was introduced so charities, and particularly the larger charities, could have protected liability for the trustee body, and more importantly, be able to employ staff, enter into contracts, leases, etc., in the name of the charity and not in the name of the individual trustees. This type of charity is governed by what we call a memorandum and articles of association, generally limited by guarantee. And this type of charity will use that document to set out their aims, powers, management, and administrative provision. We, for example, have this model. We have not yet transferred to becoming a CIO. We might do in the future. We don't find this model particularly too onerous for us. So at the moment, we will stay as we are. But I can totally understand for all new organisations coming in that to go straight for the CIO is a really good option. Also, if you know that within 6 months you're going to be entering into contracts or entering into employing staff, I really wouldn't advise to start with a constitution. I would go straight into setting up as a CIO or a charitable company, because otherwise you're going to have to change your structure quite quickly after you start. So the new CIO model, I say new, we've had it since 2006. But I have to say, it's only been in the more recent years that we've seen the volumes of those models increasing, the use of those models increasing. What we know is that we now have a much slicker way of processing those applications now, and we're seeing it become quite a common response. So in 2006, there was an Act of Parliament and a whole heap of other regulations, and it is structured and designed to take away the administrative burden faced previously by charitable companies, in the sense that it only registers and is accountable to the Charity Commission. Yet it has all the same protections and rights as a charitable company in terms of limited liabilities, being treated as a company under law, being able to enter into contracts, leases, etc., in the name of the CIO. So in terms of reporting requirements, an annual return, accounts, and annual reports are required. And most charities operate to a 12-monthly accounting period, either following the calendar or financial year. Some charities follow the academic year, So it's up to you as an organisation to choose the right accounting period that fits your requirements. The Charity Commission gives you 10 months to submit from the financial year end. Charities that are late are shown as defaulting charities on the Charity Commission's website. And even once submitted, it will highlight in red next to your accounts the number of days late you were for filing. So it really doesn't look good for external funding bodies. So we work really hard to make sure that we are practicing what we preach and that we're setting a good example. But do make sure that if you go down this route that you are filing your returns on time. The Charity Commission will allow accounting periods of 6 months to 18 months if groups are changing their legal structure. So sometimes we need to do a bit of movement there. And there are two types of CIO, which is the foundation model and the association model. The association model has a wider membership who appoint the charity trustees democratically at an AGM, which is very similar to what you get with an unincorporated association that's not a company. So this is a company model for unincorporated associations, where you want democratic elections. The Constitution should set out the aims, powers and membership provisions and how trustees are appointed. There are various template constitutions for the CIO available from national charities such as our own, and the Charity Commission produce generic ones as well. The foundation model has no wider membership and the trustee body is in effect self-appointing. For an organisation like ours, for example, who are national and who doesn't have a membership, people subscribe because they would like our services. We now do not, for example, as a charitable company, do wider AGMs and elections because under company law, there is a right now that you do not have to hold an AGM, and the foundation model follows that premise. Our advice subscription service, which I hope some of you are using, and if you haven't, do speak to your advisor, can help you on identifying the right legal structure for your particular group. Choosing and preparing a governing document, registering as a charity, etc. The Charity Commission also produces extensive guidance on this. What I would say is to register as a charity or get advice on what you do not need a solicitor. We'll be able to get hold of a solicitor for you at a point that you might need one, but for many, we are spending huge amounts of money registering charities and we really don't need to. All other types of charities require a minimum of £5,000 per annum to register and be able to produce documentary evidence of that. However, a CIO can register irrespective of its income level or current funding position, which is really interesting and gives us more flexibility. It can also have receipt and payment accounting up to £250,000 turnover, as opposed to having to do the full charitable company accounts on an accruals basis. So the CIO, the Charitable Incorporated Organisation, just to recap, so it came in 2006. It's a simpler form of incorporated charity to reduce regulatory burden, has two different types of CIO. There's an association model where we're electing and the foundation model where we're not electing for an AGM. So charity trusteeship. So we're going to move on to social enterprise model shortly, but this is a really important area for us to think through about what does it mean to be a charity trustee. And the principles are the same whether you're running a tiny grassroots organisation or a huge national. What is different is the sliding scales of responsibility and how they work differently depending on the number of paid staff they have. But we'll touch on that at the end. All types of charities require at least a minimum of 3 trustees. The maximum number can be defined in the Constitution, or you don't have to have a maximum cap. The trustees are the people who are responsible for all administrative and management decisions relating to the charity. Some charities refer to them as directors, committee members, or trustees, and I've even worked with one organisation where the trustee body was called the Grand Council. Whatever their title may be, they are those who are appointed to make sure that the management decisions are appropriate and who do so are considered trustees under the law. They are the custodian, the trustees of the activities of that charity. They should be appointed in accordance with the processes laid out in the governing instrument. whether that be a constitution or a company or a trust form. And this is usually at a general meeting by the membership for those that have a democratic structure. With a CIO, the Charitable Incorporated Organisation, the names of the first trustees are laid out in the constitution, and you state next to each trustee what their length of office will be. This is usually 2 to 3 years for the first trustee of the CIO. You must then hold an AGM within 18 months of being registered as a charity, and then no more than 15 months from then on in. As a trustee body, you should meet regularly to manage the affairs of the charity, and these meetings must be minuted and recorded, as should any general meeting with the membership. An important thing here to remember, generally we see that boards have between 4 and 8 meetings a year. Doesn't mean you can't have more or less, but generally that's about the number taken depending on the size of your organisation. And those trustee board minutes are private minutes of the organisation, and it's the AGM minutes, which is the annual general meeting, which is public domain. So as a trustee body, you should be meeting regularly enough to make sure you are managing the affairs of the charity, and these meetings, as I said, must be minuted. The full responsibilities of trusteeship are laid out in the Charity Commission Guidance, CC3, the Central Trustee Guide, and we also have full guidance on our website relating to all areas of trusteeship, e.g. financial management, planning activities, business planning, which you should find useful. If you haven't been into our knowledge bank, there's something around, I think, now 160 documents about everything you're trying to do or trying to achieve as a charity. So I really would recommend, if you haven't had a look, see what's in there that you do. I've worked with all manners of boards and trustee bodies from the diversity of charities, and the best advice I can give you is to work as a team always in the interests of the charity and your beneficiaries, and always follow and act in accordance with the governing document. I think really importantly, I've seen some very, very difficult times when I've been brought in to work with the chair of the board and the chief executive or the staff member that works there, and where they're in dispute and they're arguing, and it's really distressing that everyone concerned. And at some point along the way, one of those two or both of those two have completely forgotten what they're there to do. We are here to deliver what we said we deliver for the people that need it most. And that is my only goal being here as chief executive, for example. My only goal is ensuring that the money that we've managed to raise is applied appropriately and to the most efficient way I can to help the most people I possibly can. And my trustee board are absolutely incredible. And their job really is to support me, make sure that I'm doing my job right, but also to make sure that I'm supported when I'm doing a very stressful job. And they're a team of learned advisors. So, for example, on my board, I have an employment lawyer. I'm very lucky. I also have a housing lawyer, also very lucky because obviously we're a legal charity, so we often have lots of lawyers on our board. I have fundraising experts, marketing experts. I have a GP. I have someone who's a mental health clinician, and the team, and an academic. And the team is really fantastic. And when we're developing the business into new areas, I then make sure that on the board it's reflecting what we're trying to do as a charity as well. And also, most crucially, they've got fiduciary duties. So they're watching the finances really carefully, making decisions that will ensure the charity remains solvent and able to support its beneficiaries. And that's really, really crucial. If in doubt, always take professional advice and/or approach the regulator. I've worked with boards where one person dominates and makes all the decisions, and that's not good either. Always remember that as trustees, you are all equally responsible, all equally liable for the decisions of that charity. So it's absolutely essential you all know. For example, we don't have a post of treasurer. We purposefully don't have not that it can be a very good thing for lots of organisations. We don't, because my board believe that they are all equally responsible for the finances and they are equally as well versed in the financial position of our charity. But it's up to you. making sure something works for you and your organisation in your particular circumstances is what's really matters. If in doubt, as I said, always come and ask us, drop us an email and we will help you out. But indeed, or we will tell you who's there to help you. Always ensure that new trustees coming on are well inducted and at the very least receive a copy of the constitutional governing instrument and at the latest annual reports and accounts. I always have also the new trustees come in for the day, come and see the services we're running, understand what we're doing, and become quite engaged with how they might be able to help better. Because anyone who's a trustee, who's a volunteer, is only doing it because they want to help and they want to feel useful. So making sure that they're useful is massively important. We obviously have a chair of a board and we have a vice chair, and you can have a company secretary if you're running as a company, but that is your choice. You do not have to do that if you don't want to. The Companies Act changed quite recently, and so there's things now that you don't have to do that you did before. But making sure that you have something that's functioning and works for you to allow you to do the things you need to do is most important. Okay, and in terms of just finishing off really before we move on, as you'll see the next slide on community interest companies, do remember around disqualifications for trustees. Charities trustees should sign a declaration to act as a trustee, stating they are not disqualified from acting as a trustee. There's a template on the Charity Commission site. An undischarged bankrupt have been removed by the Charity Commission or Companies House from acting as a trustee or director if they have unspent convictions relating to dishonesty or fraud. Charities that work with vulnerable adults or children should carry out full enhanced DBS checks of all its volunteers and the trustees if they have contact with vulnerable beneficiaries. All charities should have safeguarding policies and procedures in place, and again we have templates on our guidance around that. We produce example policies, procedures and templates to help you get all of that stuff right. So if you're ever not sure, take some advice before you adopt someone onto your board formally. Okay, so we're going to move out the world of charity into a hybrid model of what I would consider a social enterprise would be best to use today, is normally used as a community interest company. So a community interest company is a type of company introduced in 2005 under the Companies Act of 2004, designed for social enterprises that want to use their profits and assets for the public good. A CIC may be limited by shares or by guarantee. Most are limited by a guarantee, governed by articles of association. Templates for both models are available to download from the CIC regulator website, and they are all under the .gov web address. When a CIC is formed, it must express how it intends to benefit the community. This term can be defined in several ways, but usually it refers to a distinct group of people wider than the membership of the CIC itself, which could be considered to be a section of the community. As such, the community might refer to the residents of a particular town or a social group, such as the elderly, or people with special needs, for example. So community can have lots of different meanings. However, a CIC may also have as its purpose a more general benefit to the community at large. For example, the promotion and encouragement of sporting activities may well be equally valid in fulfilling the community interest test. So the asset lock. There is an essential feature of all CICs, and this is designed to make sure that the assets of the CIC are used exclusively for the benefit of the community. Any assets and profits, aside from those distributed in accordance with the rules on dividend capping, must be retained within the CIC and used solely for the community benefit. The only bodies to which assets are allowed to be transferred are other asset lock bodies. Those organisations which already have an asset lock, this means that assets may be transferred to charities or to other CICs. The asset lock must be referred to explicitly as a provision in the CIC Articles of Association. In the case of a CIC existing as a company, limited by shares, then a dividend cap must be put in place. The purpose of this is to ensure that a balance is achieved between providing an attractive investment opportunity often essential in stimulating and maintaining the financial backing to run the CIC, and making sure that the majority of the profits made are applied to the community benefits. So when we think about that CIC, I think it's really important to reflect on why it was set up. It was set up largely to give us a vehicle for people that wanted to do social good, but still wanted to operate as a private company. And for most CICs, there can be a lot of blurring of grey. So some people are CICs, but really they should be registered as a charity. If you are a charity and you act like a charity and you have activities of a charity, which is for the Charity Commission to decide, then you must register as a charity if you're over the thresholds. You don't have a choice which one you're going to use. If you are a charity, you should register as such. It's that simple. However, the CIC, I think, although it's hugely useful to lots of organisations, and I know it's been largely welcome, it does blur the edges for us. And sometimes I think it's, what are you set up to do? Who are you trying to benefit? If it's just about personal benefits, but you want to do some good, then I think using the CIC is the way forward. However, if what you're trying to do is public good and it's about doing fantastic work that's going to benefit the world around you, then I really think you need to think very hard about why you wouldn't be a charity. But as I said, we're going to go through some pros and cons in a minute, but just so you can see the different sort of registrars and regulators. So the Charity Commission for England and Wales, there's a separate regulator for charity for Scotland, the OSCR. There's also Companies House, the CIC regulator, and HMRC charities, which I'm going to touch on in a minute. So the advantages and disadvantages of registering for charity status then. Charities are widely recognised as existing for social good. Exemptions from corporation tax on profits from trading undertaken in the course of charitable activities. So for example, I have a separate trading arm, which is a wholly owned trading subsidiary, but presently I'm not needing to use it, as all of my trade is what they call primary purpose trade. So what that means is that any money I'm making is in direct furtherance of my objects. So I'm allowed to do it as a charity. I'm allowed to trade, I'm allowed to generate income, and I can do a lot more than what people realise we can do. And I also get 80% mandatory rate relief, and there's 20% discretionary rate relief from business rates, which, you know, for us, which you register with a different local authority areas you're in. I'm still receiving my discretionary rate relief. I know I'm hearing stories that others are not. So we're in changing times for the local authorities. However, just keep your eye on that. But rate relief is massively important, and only someone with charitable status can get that. Gift aid relief on donations from individuals, you must be a charity to receive it. Stamp duty, land tax relief on freehold property, and leases used for charitable purposes. As a charity, you will not pay VAT on some goods and services, and certain sources of grant funding are open only to organisations with charitable status. Indeed, I'm finding more and more that some funders are allowing CICs to apply for funding, but others are not. I think it's around 80% of funders that will only give money to charity and not to a CIC. So you may find it very hard to fundraise as a CIC. As I said, a CIC is largely set up to run a business, and where you might want financial backing or financial support, and you're trying to run a business. You're not trying to run a charitable organisation on donation and fundraising income. Charities may face restrictions on work that can be carried out or funded. So, you know, you do have to work within your objects. I have recently widened our objects because we had historically worked only in London, and for the last 18 months we've now been national. So we opened up our geographical boundaries, for example. And around certain political activities and types of trading, they can be subjected to restrictions. You'll find people like Greenpeace or Oxfam have a separate political arm where they do their political campaigning from, which is not from the heart of the charity itself. Organisations with charitable status must comply with regulatory requirements, including those relating to the preparation of annual accounts and returns. We must follow SORP. So the advantages and disadvantages of a community interest company. So directors can be paid, just like those in a charity. Now there are exemptions. There are some charity trustees which are remunerated, but normally they are not remunerated for being a charity trustee. They might be remunerated because they're kindly giving their legal services to an organisation, maybe at 50% rather than at full price. So as long as there's processes and procedures and checks and balances in place, then it's fine for you to be able to pay someone if you've got authority to do so from the Charity Commission. More flexibly on trading and enterprise activity, you're not so restricted. Opportunities for external investment. So it's a lot easier for you to attract external investment, although we already have a social investment loan as a charity, so there are grey lines on these. And a more straightforward registration process, however, there are fees involved, whereas to register a charity, presently there are not fees involved. However, we are saying that they are presently surveying and looking at whether they should be charging the Charity Commission another austerity line. Okay, let's have a look. I've got a question here from Julie, thank you. I've come across, organisations who did not want to give out small grants, but obviously they can't do that from their funding. My question is, are CIOs or charities the only type of setup that allow for giving grants to individuals or organisations, or are there others? So the situation is that you have to be a charity to give once money's been given to a charity, then it must only be used for a charity. So in terms of, I'm just checking the question, types of setup that allow for giving grants to individual organisations. So the point is that I think you start the question somewhere else. If you're a charity, you should be registered as a charity. And we can help you make that decision. Obviously, local authorities give out grants, other public bodies give out grants, and a company can give out a grant. But it's where did the money come from originally? Where did that money start? So if the money was charitable to begin with, then it could only be given to another charity. So that's where we get some grey areas coming into things. So, for example, a forum that wants to give out grants, I would ask, where did they get that money from? And how do they know that it's meant to be given for that purpose? So it depends where they got the money from to begin with. And for them to receive money that's charitable, they would have had to have been a charity themselves. So there's lots of things around money laundering and the passing of money, and there's different legislation around making sure that that's done appropriately. But I understand that people might want to give out, so a CIC, for example, could give out a grant if it wanted to. My question is, where did the money come from to begin with? So to be able to, have they self-generated that income and then they want to give that away? Well, that's up to them if they want to give it away, that's no problem. I suppose the question is if you're going to be then measuring what they use it for. Are you giving it as a donation, or are you then going to measure the use of the grant? And to be able to do that, you would probably need to be a charity yourself. Hope that helps. So directors can be paid a salary, as I said, unlike charity trustees, but we just need to watch this, okay? And 99% of charity trustees are not paid to be a trustee in this country. More flexibility, as I said, on trading and enterprise activities, although charities can trade and can be enterprising, but of course it's a much wider opportunities you've got from elsewhere. Opportunities for external investment can come, as I said, but we've already got that. And more straightforward registration processes, as I said, but there will be fees involved, and we're waiting to see if the Charity Commission are going to start charging. The advantages and disadvantages of the community interest company. may be restricted on funding opportunities which are only available to the charity sector. And it's one of the biggest questions we get in. Organisations register themselves as a CIC and then give it 6 months and we get emails in saying, I don't understand, why am I not able to fundraise? Why have I got this problem? And we explain, you are not a charity. Therefore, why should you benefit from charitable funding? Profits are subject to corporation tax. And there's no mandatory rate relief. So, for example, we often advise people on their leases and negotiating leases with the local authorities. And if you're getting a lease, you will generally not get it as a reduced rate, but there are examples when it can happen, whereas charities often can negotiate lower rates for their rents. Also, the rate relief, it can be quite large amounts of money, thousands of pounds every year. There's no mandatory rate relief. There are examples where some local authorities have been more lenient, but we're seeing that happen less and less, even for charities. So you're certainly not going to be able to do as much. However, if you want to run a company that trades in different ways and takes different forms of finance on, and you really are generating income, wholeheartedly yourselves, without grants, without donations, etc., then a CIC is absolutely the right model for you. But it depends on what you're expecting to do with that. That's the important thing. So here is some website. Here's our website, so you know all about it. If you haven't had a chance to have a look, the Charity Commission and Companies House. And there's also one for the CIC, which is also, they're all at, www.gov.uk. The websites, I think, are really poor, so apologies, they are not ours. And my friends at the Charity Commission are not particularly happy with it either, because it doesn't allow the search. It's really bad, and when you're trying to find certain documents, it can be really, really challenging. Also, I would say that, you do want to have a good read of each of the different options and then seek some advice before you go ahead and register. As I said, we see lots of people who have registered and then very quickly have to change their model. So registering as a with a constitution, then within 3 months start to employ staff and start to take on a property. You're going to need to be a company. So already what's happening is that you're going to have to change your governing documents straight away. Or registering as a charity and thinking you're far too limited and then wishing you'd been a CIC. And then there's CICs who at the other end of the spectrum are feeling like, they were charitable and they're not going to get any of the extra benefits of being a charity. And then they're a bit frustrated about what to do. Okay, let's take another question. Okay, thank you very much, Nan. We really want to convert to a CIO from being an incorporated voluntary org because we want our forum to be its own entity. And I feel it's more secure for all those involved. Sorting out the trustees, though, is very difficult due to the remuneration that we can receive for attending meetings as parent reps. It means that at some point, everyone we have been involved with us at some point will receive a remuneration payment, even if that's only £50 for the full year. We struggle to keep a fully engaged steering group, so finding additional people who would want to be as trustee to balance out the remuneration aspect, we know would be a virtually impossible task. This is the only thing that's preventing us from applying to be a CIO and pushing us to the CIC model, when really we would rather be a CIO. Is it worth a conversation about the remuneration aspects of the trustees? I think, Nan, first of all, what I'll do is I will arrange a phone call with you with my experts. So Sarah used to work for me, but she's working all the time with groups and her knowledge around this change is massive. So let's talk to her about it. I think it's interesting because I think I've been reflecting on this, having talked to lots of your colleagues, and you're really getting, I think it's how we decide to distinguish things. You're really getting paid to advocate on behalf of the parents, but you're not being paid to be a trustee to run the charity. So I'm wondering whether, and I'm going to get Sarah to come back to you on this, so please don't all hold me to this. I'm wondering whether we need to separate out those two aspects. If you are the CIO, if you are the charitable trustees of the CIO, you can't get paid to be a trustee, but you could get paid for your specialist skill that you are delivering. Like if you're a solicitor or an accountant, for example. I think it is worth a conversation with the Charity Commission I think I'm going to task Sarah to do that for you, because I think anything that's been happening under the guise of contact, anything that's been happening within that realm would have been charitable, because contact is charitable. So I think the nature of what you're doing, in my eyes, is charitable. Everything about it, of course, is about how you present an activity. Okay, so I think you're doing huge amounts of education, you're working in the realm of health and well-being, you're obviously doing things that are, a peer support, you're offering lots of different elements depending where you are in the country, all of which I think, is charitable. The strategic oversight stuff in itself isn't charitable, but the wider reason that you're here and your wider activities, I think, intrinsically are charitable. If I really wouldn't go down the CIC route until we've exhausted this. So let me go back, look at the CIO option with you. I think we separate out you being a trustee from you being a professional person who is advising the organisation and taking it forward, and you're only receiving small payments anyway. I think there's a conversation worth having, and I will get Sarah to do that for you. I think it's a really important point. So I totally, or the other option is that those that are receiving the remuneration are not the CIO trustees, if we can't get that to roll. So you could just have 3 people who are your CIO trustees who are not in receipt of remuneration. That is your other option. And you are all advisors of the CIO rather than trustees. But I think we are seeing much more modern understanding and interpretation these days. And I think it's worth a revisit of the conversation, because I think 10, 12 years ago, it would have been a lot harder. I think today we're starting to see examples now where this very sort of thing is being able to be looked at. So let's definitely do that then. I will get Sarah this week to pick this up and see what we can do. If we get any joy, I know this has got ramifications for many groups across the UK, particularly obviously the Charity Commission is working for England and Wales as a jurisdiction, then we will obviously, speak to the team at Contact and make sure we get all this information out to all of you. I think it really is worth us having a try. So let's pick this up this week and see whether we can get any joy. I think it's how we present what you're getting remunerated for and how we distinguish the two is going to be pretty important here, because I think your activities are charitable. So I worry about organisations becoming a CIC, because then you're not going to be able to do some of the other stuff that I know you're going to want to do. You're going to have an opportunity then to bring in money, to be able to fundraise, to be able to do loads of great activities, to do more of the amazing work that you're all doing out there in your own communities. So I think let's try that route first before we try something else. Okay, do we have any more questions?
We've got no further questions at this time, Helen.
Okay, I would just, in that case, I'll give you 2 more minutes and finish my warbling on, just in case there's any more questions coming through. As I've said, if you haven't used our advice service yet, please do. And if there's other queries, and we can arrange a call back for you. So do email in and we will arrange a call back if that's an easier way for you to discuss things with us. So that would be brilliant. And to say thank you for attending with us today. I know it's a very dry subject, legal documents, governing instruments, and how you run the organisation. There's also part of me that I have to say, just reflecting on that last question, that says don't become an organisation unless you have to. I do understand that you want to feel some more security, etc. However, the administrative burden, the financial burden, you're running an organisation then, and you're adding yourself policies, procedures. Don't get me wrong, we have a staff handbook that you can have, that you can buy from us, which is really cheap. You can get all your policies and procedures probably from our knowledge bank, but there's a lot of different things involved with setting up an organisation, which is more than just registering, obviously, the Charity Commission, Companies House, or whatever you choose to do. And my worry is that you start to then put these structures in place and you're making huge amounts of work for yourselves. So always the first step is the benefit of becoming an organisation going to be a really good step forward? And if it is, and it's worth that little bit of extra work and pain, then good for you, absolutely, will help you do that every step of the way. I would just be a little bit cautious and say, don't become an organisation if you know, in terms of if you feel that you have more security. I think we need to think through what that really is. What security do we think you're going to get? And let's chat about that first. And what benefit of you becoming a constituted organisation? And it could be that it is absolutely the right way forward, that we go that way. But let's just talk through each step at a time, I think. Julie has asked that I pass this on. Oh yes, so we've been looking more broadly at the implications of paying people as individuals. Obviously, there's implications for the benefits agency, the DWP, where remuneration for strategic work is often okay. So there's different people to satisfy here. One bit is the Charity Commission, which we've talked about. The other stuff is making sure that if you're receiving benefits, about how you're receiving a remuneration and does that affect your benefits. Also, of course, so contact the benefits team to support you. We've also got benefit experts who work for us, and we will absolutely ask contact to help you. And if they need a hand, they'll pass you over to us. And we'll absolutely need to assess to make sure we don't want to do anything that's going to mean that you as an individual are going to be worse off. So sometimes you need to do a better off calculation and make sure the individual concerned that was receiving the income, you know, we are looking at the whole picture of that. So I know that they've been working on guidance. There's nothing straightforward about it, about whether you should then register as being self-employed for tax purposes. It just, I have to say that the possible implications of paying people is not straightforward, very frustratingly. However, we will talk through each example with each of you and make sure that either your advisors at contact or with ourselves, if anyone needs a hand, to talk through to make sure that we're handling every single example individually, and you know that we're doing the best for each of you, which is really, really important because you're doing such an incredible job out there that we don't want to leave you in a difficult situation with the taxman or with your or with the DWP, etc. We have contracts with the DWP presently around universal credit, so we've got some of the leading universal credit experts in the country that work for us. So we will find a way of helping you either way. So there's two different questions. One about individual payments. What does that mean for you as an individual? Then it's about how does that square off with you becoming an organisation? And I think it'd be really fantastic if this year we can really iron that out for all of you, come up with the right structure, get the right agreements in place by the bodies needed to make sure that you can carry on your good work. I don't think that you should be hindered because of it, that's for sure. So thank you for attending with us today. A short questionnaire will launch at the end of this webinar. So if you can take the time to complete it, that'd be really kind, because we also want to know what future areas you want help with, so we can help us with plan for future events. The recording of this webinar and presentation will be available on Contact's website in the next 2 weeks. And look out for news about this on our participation home page and social media networks. So thank you so much, and we're here if we need you. Nan will get back to you specifically, and we'll also keep you in the loop, Julie. And let's try and unpick these last few bits and bobs so we can get you working brilliantly out there. Thank you so much for today, and yeah, do email in and let's see what we can do to help. Thank you so much. Bye.